Welcome to the Alakus channel, and this is class number 7 in the discourse Shehikdimu 5672, class number 7. All the 7 are special. This class, as the entire first Maamor of this series, has been dedicated l'schus Refuah Sheleimo for Avraham Ben Parvin. May he have a complete and total refuah. So we are holding over here. Yesterday we were talking about how the will for something already opens a person up towards that entity. It creates a pathway. It creates kind of it opens the beginning of a connection of a private individual who's living in his or her own world. Through the desire, you're opening a channel from the person. You get already a connection to whatever it is that you desire. And that's the concept of the Keser. Before every world, there is a Keser. The Keser is the will of Hashem for that world to be. And we've discussed how those will exists on multiple levels. But in each level, it's the will from Hashem, from the Ein Sof, for that particular world to be, and that already creates a relationship to the world, albeit that we're going to see later that it's only an armakif, it's an encompassing light, it's not yet an energy that is already conditioned, contracted, limited, and acclimated to that particular creature or that particular being. It's still infinite, it's still beyond it, but it's already... You're taking a step outside of yourself. You're already moving outward of yourself. And that's where we're holding over here. V'kasher okenoida. Let's go to the words of kamoy al derech mashal ba'adam, like by analogous to a person. Lamata, down here below. The kaidim shenes oided be'ezer ratzon le'ezer davar. And we learned these lines already yesterday, just a few lines here. Before a person had to experience a desire for something, who moved on the menu legamri, you're completely separated from it. You don't have any shaykhs, you have no connection to that entity. But when you are awakened to have a desire for something, this already creates now that you have already a relationship to that entity, because once there is a desire for it, then you're already you will get involved in whatever it is. Now, it's still a long way until you will see the project through. You don't even have the idea yet. It's very, very vague. You have a desire for the general, you know what you want, but how, what, where, what's the concept behind it? How are you going to develop it? And the mechanics of what you need, and what will it take to make it happen? Until you're going to get it down to the final stage, it still takes a whole lot of evolution of energy progression. Okay, the energy is going to have to move through many levels. It might still be years away, but once there is a desire, it's already a whole. It's already the beginning of the story. There is a will. Like every story, when a person tells a story of how you started, how did you start this project? How did you start this company? How do you get involved? How did you get involved in education? How did you get involved in medicine? How did you get involved in this project? And everybody's got a story. I was visiting over here, something, and this happened, that happened, and then I met this, and I realized, and then I had a desire. Something sparked that desire, and that opens up. Sometimes a lifetime of pursuit and achievements begins with something that triggers a desire. So, and that's the opening. As it is known, as it is known that ratzon, desire, comes from the word racing. Merutza means to race, and the idea is you're stepping out of yourself. You're racing out of self towards something. And the concept of merutza means ahatiya, it's the bending of hamshacha and a flow. You're flowing towards something. And before the person was awakened to any kind of a desire, the person is in general in a state of separation, whether separated, either separated towards to that particular project, you have no relationship to it, you have no connection to it. And then I'll give you an example, of a perfect example regarding myself. At a certain point when I was about 17, 18 years old, I was exposed to Chabad Hasidism. Until then, it literally was not a reality. It didn't occupy any space in my soul. I didn't have a connection to it. I didn't have an interest in it. I was a spiritual seeker, but I didn't know that Chabad Hasidus is so rich with and can satiate me with what I'm seeking. Literally, it was off the charts. I had no relationship to it. Nothing to do with it. And then I was exposed to it by accidentally, if you might say, obviously by Hashgacha Pratis. I went for a Shabbos. I experienced my first shir in Hasidus, and this became now a lifetime obsession that I can't get enough of, the pursuit of the divine knowledge as it is conveyed and revealed through Chabad Hasidism. So the idea over here is, so before that I was completely separated from it. And here he's saying even more, before a person has a desire for anything, if you don't have desire for anything, so then the person is in a state of elevation. You're very much concealed within yourself. All of our desires and drives are what drive us out of ourselves into whatever it is that we make important, that is important in our life. Because you don't have any revelation towards this entity, towards this project. And desire, and desire is a bending towards something. What does that mean? The exiting, v'hizgalus, and the revelation of yourself, l'davar, to an entity shechutz li'atzmai, that's outside of yourself. Here you are, an entity, a being. There is me, there is myself, there is my world, there is my reality, my inside being, my inside world. If I'm going to get connected and I'm going to get involved, with somebody, something, an entity, I'm going to be providing a service, whatever it is that you're going to be doing, whatever it is that you want, and so on and so forth, means that now you're turning your attention, you're turning your energy flow towards that any given project. So you're opening yourself up to it. It's like when, for example, when we're involved with something, when we're deeply involved with something, and we know we can't do it ourselves, we need help. So we're thinking, who are the people that can help us? But we have to catch their attention. If the person is very, very, let's say if you need financial support, and for the project, so you need a super mega donor to take interest in your project, but the person has a million people running after them. They have already their things that they're connected to. So you have to catch and figure out a way to enter into their world, to open up, that they should have a desire in what you in what you're providing. So they should lean in with what? With all the assistance that they can give. Sometimes that's all you need, is you need to get into one or two people that can make it a reality, because they have the means to provide, but you need their ratzon, you need their will. And then you have to figure it out. Sometimes you only have a 3-minute presentation in order to be able to open them up, to be able to have a desire to pay attention, to get involved. So just like it is with others, we can understand within ourselves as well. In other words, through desire, we open ourselves up and we turn towards any given entity. So, and the same obviously refers to God with the worlds, with all of creation. Before there was an awakening of desire from Hashem for the creation, for the worlds. Hashem, we can understand that He's not like just a wealthy person who's also physical, who's living in the same world that we live. So even like, in our reality, and He's also, we have a common, share the common, we're all time and space creatures. So there's so much of us that we have in common. Happens to be that I have already an interest, I have a want in such and such. This person has his attention is not drawn to it. To figure out how to pull him from his or her world to pay attention to my particular project for whatever reason. Now that's with an individual that is already within the context of our existence down here. When you have to get God's attention, so to speak, and God is infinite and completely of another sphere, if you might say, completely outside of the entire context of any limitation, boundaries, and definitions, and so on and so forth. So over here, the channel is even more important, because why in the world would he take any interest in any kind of worlds? So over here, that's the channel, and it has to start off with the amazing moment. So in other words, what we have to say is, we have to bench God, we have to thank God for the amazing moment when when it was arose in God's simple will that He wants to create worlds. So His will begins, and that's where our story, the story of all of existence, the story of the cosmos, all begin in that awakening of that will. Before he had a will, he doesn't have any relationship at all to the world. And on the contrary, Hashem is closed completely into Himself. He's essentially not in a revelation state. God, you see, by Hashem, He doesn't have to be revealed to anything and to anybody. It's not like He has to be in a state of revelation. He is. His absolute beingness just is. So his revelation comes because when He wants worlds, He reveals Himself. He opens up His energy flow to bestow His energy eventually to the worlds. But first, just an awakening of the will is already a revelation within Himself. I'm going to take a moment now and skip the parentheses for now. We're going to come back to that. There's a nice little piece of it. Well, you have a lot in the. We're going to have to get used to this while we go through the study. Is that a lot of places there is parenthetical ideas which He puts in, and sometimes you have one parenthesis inside another parenthesis and inside another, and sometimes you get dizzy from trying to figure out which thing is coming to explain. Sometimes it's important to skip them and then come back, because you can then complete the idea, and then you can come back to the parenthetical thought. So over here, we're going to skip a couple of lines, and about I would say almost 9 lines, something like that, and to the end of this parentheses, and we're going to go. However, no, I missed it. I fell for the parenthesis inside the parenthesis. We're going out to the end of the first parentheses, which ends with Gam loy la'atzmoi chulu. Okay, so and now the kasher Allah b'tzayin yizbarach, and when it arose in Hashem's will, desire, then it all changes. Before that, He was concealed in Himself, but when it arose in His desire, now He's in a state of openness, He's flowing, and revelation. Once He desires the worlds, His desire is for the entire project. He's interested to support, to sustain the general project of worlds, which include all the divine worlds as well. He's going to support it. He's going to invest in it, so to speak. Or, more specifically, in each individual level, as we discussed earlier, creation is a long chain. The whole process of the creative process is a long chain of worlds that evolve one from the other, stages of existence, until we get down to our physical world. For each stage and for each particular next step, there is a new will, so to speak. It's all, I say a new will, it's all particularized wills from amongst the greater will. Like when you have a desire for a house, so there is the greater big desire that a person has for the home, and then contained in that desire is a desire for a nice kitchen, and a desire for a nice living room, a nice dining room, a nice playroom for the kids, a guest bedroom, a nice all the way down, to a nice bathroom, and a this and a that, all the way down to the tiniest details that will eventually be in the house, in the home. But it's all, first is one general desire, and then there is the encompassing energy that says, now I'm going to speak to, or I'm going to look into, what does it take How will I make the dream kitchen that I've always wanted? So what am I going to do? So that has to, there is a desire for that particular project. And if it's these huge projects, when you're making a huge thing, it has entire worlds that are part of it. Like if you're making a hospital, entire departments that are all that each one needs to be built up in its own with its own structure. Or if you're creating a school or the like. So each one has its own desire. So the same is with the project of creation. There is a keser klali, a general desire for all of creation, and then there is particular desires, the keser of each world. And the keser means the opening of the flow of attention and desire and drive towards that particular stage. Even though on this level, the energy level over here is still higher from actually producing a world. Like when the ratzon of the Orein Sof, the will of the infinite one, before the tzimtzum, before the contraction, as we discussed yesterday, even before the initial black hole, right? Before the initial contraction, the Orein Sof, the infinite light, before the tzimtzum, before the contraction. Over there's already a keser. What's the keser? The ratzon. It was we brought yesterday from the Zohar, katsalik bereuse, when it awakened within the infinite the desire to create worlds. That desire. So that is still light years upon light years upon light years away. Myriads of light years, like it's endlessly away, far away from the actual literal creation. In order for the worlds to come into beingness, that energy could not produce it yet. It's too intense. It's way too high for the worlds. There needed to be first the contraction, and not just the contraction. The biggest contraction, which is the first contraction, the contraction called Tzimtzum Arishon, is where God completely hides His infinite light and diminishes it to leave zero from it. Which is in a state of removing the light completely without even leaving a trace. So much Hashem had to remove His light that nothing is left. Which means that from the current state of affairs, the worlds could never be produced. When I say the current, I mean the current of the current then. The current in the Orein Self before the Tzimtzum. The worlds could not be produced. He needed to completely hide Himself. And then afterwards re-engage or reinsert a tiny thread of light called the light of the Kav, we mentioned yesterday. And even then, even the light of the Kav that emerges is not ready to produce our world, our physical world. Only then begins a chain, a never-ending chain of evolving worlds that go on and on and on and on until we get down to our reality. As he says over here, and so too the levels that are after the tzimtzum, after the contraction. There are many contractions. Like there is a big contraction to produce the world, even when the light of the Kav emerges, for it to be able to create already the first sketch of all the worlds that we discussed earlier, which is Adam Kadmon, which is already a keser. It's a desire for already a specific type of world. What we might say is the worlds of the finite worlds that are all going to emerge. Adam Kadmon encompasses all of them, but yet it's already getting closer to a design, to a sketch of the actual worlds. That is it takes enormous contraction. And then there is another contraction in which the energy goes through strands of hair, showing on how much the light needs to be reduced. It has to be fed through, just like when we think about a little hair, how much energy flows in a human being. So there is a whole flow of energy that comes from a person. When a person can share his ideas, a person can share their emotions, a person can share their thoughts, their right? Everything can be, there's the richness and the energy flow within a human expression. But then there is that amount, how much of a person flows into, and also in your limbs of your body, obviously. The energy of a person's soul flows in their body. But then there's also the hair of a person are alive. How do we know they're alive? Because they grow. Which means that in every hair there is life. But the hair, that's the life flow of godliness, of life, of the human life, of the nefesh adam, of the soul of the person, that flows into the hair is so minuscule, so tiny, so insignificant, doesn't hurt at all. That's why if you cut a hair, it doesn't hurt. Or how many hairs we lose when we take a shower, we don't even know. It's utterly insignificant. It says, however, that in every hair there's life flowing. It says that hair is a tube. Every hair, if you put it under a microscope, you see it's a tube. There's a hollow, and inside that hollow flows a little bit. There's a little bit of you in every bit of hair, but it's so insignificant. So in the process of the divine diminishment of godly light, it goes through. First, the Tzimtzum Arishon. Tzimtzum Arishon is even more than reducing the energy down to a hair, to a tiny little hair. Why? Because in a hair, at least there's something of the original self, the original energy of the person. It's just reduced to a tiny little hair. How much can go into a hair? How much of your energy, aspirations, wants, knowledge, personality goes into your hair? Nothing. But yet, it's still something. It's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction. From the Or Ein Sof, in order to translate into worlds, God had to reduce it even. He couldn't leave one hair of Or Ein Sof left over because the worlds couldn't tolerate that. All of the worlds would never come into existence if God would leave over one tiny hair of who he was before. Connect to us through a hair. So the first Tzimtzum is a complete removal, nothing left. But then he emerges outward through a thin kav, maybe it's like a hair. Yet that kav itself that re-emerges from the Ein Sof has to go through, and it needs to produce a hair from a hair. That's called the Tzimtzum HaDiyukna, another tiny, a narrow reduction. So all of this is proving of how far are we when God has the initial desire, and we're saying that the initial desire is already considered opening a channel to the worlds. We are still very, very far from the worlds, very, very, very far from practical creation of the reality of the worlds as they are. However, we're much closer than before the will. Before the will, God was locked in himself. And in that sense, there wouldn't be any worlds at all. Now he's already interested. How he's going to get down to it is still a long way to go. It's a long haul. But yet, there is already an interest. It's already considered a mediator. It's already a medium. The infinite light that's before the Tzimtzum is already changed now. It's now, because he wants worlds, the energy itself has already, in some subtle way, adjusted itself to worlds. Because from this desire, eventually, will come forth worlds. Without this desire, these worlds would be nowhere close to coming about. Okay, so that concludes this Perek Aleph, the first Perek of the first Maamor. Mazel tov. But there is a nice little parenthesis over here, which is not the easiest parenthesis, but let's make an attempt on trying to figure out what he says. He said earlier that before a person has a will, then the person is locked in himself, and there is and he's not revealed. He's not revealed. So you might think that the person, if there's no desire, then you're not revealing to outside people. In other words, if you wouldn't have any desire for anything, sometimes we find people get depressed and they don't have any desire anymore for life. They don't want to go out. They don't want to meet people. They don't want to know of anything. They're not interested in business. They're not interested in sports. They're not interested in entertainment. They're not interested in anything. They're just sadly, withdrawn. So you would think that when someone has no desire, so that means they're withdrawn from everybody else, but they are there's still a revelation within themselves. So now he's going to say that really without desire, then there is no revelation even to the self. So let's see how he develops that. He says, the last words before the parenthesis was, She'eina b'bchinas gilui klal be'etzem. The person is not in a state of any revelation. Gam loy b'bchinas gilui la'atzmai. Kiviyachol. In God's case, before he had a desire for the world, it's almost like he's not even revealed to himself. Lihiyois. Shegam magilui la'atzmai, because even the revelation to himself, hu b'bchinas shaychus la'izadavar, is already in a state of connection to something. In other words, as he's revealing himself to himself, So, for example, on the most superficial level of this thought, which again, uh, of this thought is, if you think about yourself, and you think about your stream of consciousness, and you're becoming aware of, we're constantly so busy with all the stuff in our life that is there and occupying our minds. This has to be taken care of. This one's calling. This one texted me. This email. This thing. This that. This that. If you can imagine a moment of silence where you're like, right, you're just shutting everything down, and then almost you bring yourself to a point where there's nothing going on. There's just absolute silence. You're not. I feel like in some kind of a meditation class. Okay, you're shutting, you're disconnecting. Shutting every opening, every channel, every interest, any flow of energy to anything down. Shut every valve down. Every valve of our soul is like this big fountain. We're pouring our consciousness, our interest, our drives into thousands of different projects and things. So imagine shutting each faucet down. That the water, the fountain is not. It's just sitting quietly, still, in itself. So now when you open up the valve and you want to so there's no consciousness. And to open up and you're becoming conscious, what I think he's saying is, immediately there is consciousness. It's consciousness versus within yourself regarding something. How you feel regarding your wife, how you feel regarding your children, how you feel regarding what are my aspirations, desires, it's a revelation, a consciousness is already within the context of something outside of yourself. Shaharei, as he says, Gam ha'yisaydidus v'hagilui li'atzmai, because even the awakening and the hagili and the revelation to oneself, harehu be'eza davar, it is within, you're thinking of something. Imkain, and therefore, hareza b'bchina shayches la'davar, that already makes you already connected to that entity. Rak shehu la'atzmai adayin, but it is to yourself. In other words, I can have suddenly an awareness. I haven't shared it with anybody. I haven't conveyed it. If I'm thinking about somebody, it's not in any way known to them. It's not revealed to them. It's to myself, but it is in regards to that somebody. But before the awakening, there's no revelation itself. On the contrary, one is concealed in themselves, not in a state of revelation at all. Now, the question is, can there be revelations of experience which is just for self and it's about the self and it's not in connection to anything? So he says like this: it's possible that there should be somewhat of a relationship to self. It is possible that there should be a relationship to self. That is not in connection to another, like in the experience of pleasure. It's possible to experience a delight, not of something, but of self. But this is not really revelation. Okay, as we're getting close to the cutoff time, we're going to leave this. I'll leave you in this very silent thought, where you can all ponder this till tomorrow, about whether you can experience an experience and it's nothing outside of you, just within yourself. Let's pick that up as a Hashem in tomorrow's class. Meanwhile, let Mashiach be here before tomorrow.